We got 20 minutes for, frankly, a big topic. And my goal really for you here is two things. One, we're going to talk a little bit about the psychology that gets in the way sometimes of us asking impactful questions, good questions that get us to the truth, right? That get us to the truth, which at the end of the day, whoops, wrong way, back that up. There we go. So it gets us to the truth, right? So there's roadblocks. We've got voices in our heads sometimes that keep us from asking those questions. So we're going to talk a little bit about that psychology. And then second, I'm going to walk you through some Sandler tactics. You've probably seen these tactics before, but I want to try to organize them a little bit better so you can prepare for some of those moments where you have to ask those hard questions. Fair enough? So let me ask you a question. Let's start with the psychology side. Who here has heard of the term confirmation bias? Put your hands up, way high. Okay, I see a few smatterings here and there. All right, who's heard the term happy years? A few more hands there, okay? So confirmation bias is the underlying psychology of happy years, okay? Confirmation bias is driven by a number of things and some data to support that. So the the American Institution of Press did a survey of where people like to get their news. And what they found was 54% of people choose to get news from sources that supports the values and the beliefs that they already have. And if you think about that, the newspapers you read, the TV shows that you watch, they tend to be supportive of what you already believe, right? We do that because we like simplicity. And from that perspective, we think about this. I don't know if any of you have seen the TV commercial lately. They talk about the 35,000 decisions that an average person makes every day, right? Some of those decisions are very small. Sometimes they're bigger in nature. So we live in a complicated world. Our minds are constantly going. We're processing information and trying to decide what should we do. We need simplicity. So we tend to lean towards things that we think, we know, we hope, and we are looking for affirmation that what we believe, what we think, what we hope is right. And that gets in the way sometimes for asking questions, right? And then finally, look, we all want to be happy and fulfilled. Confirmation bias is one way that people's self-esteem goes up. When you find things that reaffirm what you believe, reaffirm what you think, you feel better about yourself. So when you go into a sales call with a big prospect and your pipeline's, maybe it's got a little hole in it somewhere, this would be a good plug for that. You get happy ears. You start hearing things. You lead the witness. You ask questions that give you the answers that you're hoping to hear. Is that fair? So let's talk about how do we get past that. A couple things. Sandler rules. You guys all familiar with Sandler rules? Sandler rules are largely about mindset, right? This is one of my favorite Sandler rules. Right? Don't spill your candy in the lobby, right? It talks a lot about getting information, right? Don't give all your information away all at once, right? Give it slowly. One of the biggest things I took away from yesterday was the candy store has changed a little bit, right? I was playing around with ChatGPT the other day, and I asked it a simple question. Why should somebody buy Sandler training? 37 seconds later, I had a very lengthy reasons why somebody should buy my product. That's interesting. Why should I buy Sandler training versus? Got another whole list. Right? So candy stores changed, right? And some of that is very reflective, in some of this data. So I'm going to share with you some data on a couple of things that supports this. First, this is data from Gong, one of our great partners, and Sales Hacker regarding talk to listen ratio. Who's heard the Sandler 70-30 rule? Okay? It's a good rule. It's good aspiration. But here's the reality. The world's changed a little bit. And I think Jody talked a little bit about this yesterday. People are seeking conversations. They're seeking an exchange of information. And what Sales Hacker has discovered is the ideal ratio is about 43% talk, 57% listen. So it's more conversational. You're still listening more than you're talking, but it's more balanced. What data from Gong has showed us is in the red there, your average reps might be good at asking questions, but they have a tendency to load all their questions up right at the very beginning. That's what that high mark shows you. They're asking a whole bunch of questions right at the beginning. It sounds a little bit like an interrogation, and then they go into show up and throw up mode, and they present for the back half of the call, right? Whereas your top performers, first, you can see there's more spikes in there, which means they're asking more questions, but they're doing it paced out. It's conversational. It's an interaction, right? So it's important to think about, am I having a conversation, am I preparing for a conversation, or am I preparing for an interrogation, right? Okay? More data from Gong about the numbers of questions to ask. Okay, what's the sweet spot here that's going to get you the highest likelihood of success, a next step, a progressed opportunity, a closed deal? The right answer, and this is also supported by Sales Hacker and a study from Harvard Business Review, the sweet spot's about 11 to 14 questions, right? You go less than that, right? So the average salesperson, this has also been studied, asks 2.7 questions before they go into we can, we show, and they tell you an answer. Salespeople are problem solvers in a lot of ways. They find a little problem, they go right to solution, right? We got to be patient. We got to ask more questions. We got to think a little bit about how do we ask those questions in an effective way, right? So more questions, but too many questions turns into an interrogation, drops you down, right? So it goes into that synthesizing and simplifying model, right? Ask the right questions, progress the conversation accordingly. Now, this is an interesting statistic, and I wish I had some of the data from Jody's talk yesterday, because this is data from sales managers, sales leaders. It was a study that we did with Sales Mastery, and sales leaders say that 42% of their team is unacceptable, needs improvement with needs analysis, and only 23% of their team are excellent or exceeds expectations. It's kind of bleak. Jody said yesterday that 67% of buyers said that salespeople don't understand their needs, right? This might be a little hopeful. The reality is, what does the customer think, right? So needs analysis becomes important. So let me give you an example of this. This is in the where you should ask these questions type model. I have a client they're a software provider. They do an education-based software. They sell into the medical community. And they have a high demand product. It's a really good product. They get a lot of inbound leads. Good for them, right? The leads are to get a demo of the product. So when they came in, and they were doing a lot of demoing, talking, showing, telling, and then chasing these opportunities. Their talk to listen ratio was 70 to 75% of the time they were talking, right? So we said, all right, let's change a little of this. You need to give them a demo because that's what they requested. That's what they're expecting. But let's change the cadence of how that demo works. Let's start with a couple of things. You have 5 big things that your product does. Lay them out to your prospects. So, Mr. Prospect, tell me, which one of these is most important to you? Okay, interesting. How come? Tell me why that one. Why don't we start our demo there? Doesn't matter if it doesn't go in the order that you want. Let's start with the one that they care about. Show them the product. Show them the features, the function, how it works. At the end of that feature function demo, they were typically saying, any questions? And the answer would be, no, looks good. Sounds great. Okay, let's keep going. Change that a little bit to, okay, so what do you think of what I just showed you? How would this help you? What kind of an impact would this have on your ability to do other things if we can implement something like that? So it's important to think about where in your sales process are you going to do your discovery. There's a give and a get. They showed them the demo, but they found out why it's important. They found out what the impact of it is. 2 simple questions, one at the beginning, one at the end, that helps quantify some of that, right? So where in your sales process do you kind of need to mix that give and take, okay? So now, word choice becomes critically important. Questions that start with how and what are diagnostic in nature. They're also very open-ended. They get people talking. Once you've found out some diagnostics, we got to find out, well, strategically, why is that important? Why is that happening? What are they hoping we'll get for an outcome if we do something different about it, right? So how and what starts the conversation. Why gets to strategic. And I've done some reading lately about the difference between why and how come. Why is a great question. But every time I think about why, I picture my mother standing at the front door going, why did you do that? It can be an aggressive question. Right? It can be an off-putting question sometimes. So sometimes we have to make it a little bit more casual. Eric, help me out. How come you decided to do that? Right? It's just a little bit softer. It's a little bit more casual, but it gets you to the same place. Right? But you also have to earn how come. Why is seen to be a little bit more formal and, frankly, a little bit more fitting to a business setting. So if you've got good rapport with your prospect, how come can be much more impactful. But sometimes we got to earn that one. Right? Okay? So I'm going to give you some tools here If you go to the Sandler website, sandler.com, for those of you who haven't been there, you go to a little magnifying glass up top, and you just search 100 questions. You're going to get a report that my friend Mark McGraw, who was on this stage a little while ago, put together 100 sales questions and when to ask them in your sales process. They're really good questions. What I found is 64 out of 100 of those questions are how and what questions. They're diagnostic in nature. They're discovery-based. They're really good questions. If you go to the Gong website, gong.com, and you search 43 questions, they'll give you a report on 43 impactful questions you can ask within your sales process. 57% of those questions are how and what questions, right? So that word choice, opening up, right? How and what gets you past happy ears. You might not get what you're expecting to hear. You might not like what you're going to hear, but it helps you get past it, versus asking sometimes a leading question that'll give them the answer, right? Now, your goal with a lot of these questions, get more response. This is more data from Gong, and this is looking at customer response to questions asked by salespeople. And what this is showing here is the longer the customer story length is, the higher the level of success you have. So if your customer's giving you short, soundbite type answers, your win rate's under 20%. When your story starts to get into the 250 word length, your success rate climbs up close to 60%. So the more you get your prospect talking, the higher the likelihood that you're going to be able to progress your deals, right? And a lot of that has to do with how you ask these questions, right? So buyers are pretty good, though. Salespeople might be good at asking some high-level question, right? This is a good high-level, open-ended question. What's your biggest challenge with your current provider, right? You guys probably don't have this anymore. They probably have a chat bot that they're frustrated with rather than an 800 number, but maybe they call an 800 number. Great. We pride ourselves on customer service and a local experience. Great. Tell me how. You've suddenly lost control of the questioning narrative, and you've bit on a tiny little problem where you're in pitch mode talking about a solution. So let's talk about how do we defend against this. Who knows how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? 3, right? The wise old owl told us it takes 3 licks to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop. Well, sometimes it takes 3 questions to get to the truth from your prospect, right? 1 question won't get you the answer that you want. You got to be prepared to go a little bit more deeper. A little bit more deeper, a little bit deeper, right? So at the heart of this is the Sandler questioning strategies. And if you haven't spent a lot of time with this, I'd recommend you get with your Sandler trainer and you do so. Right? At the heart of this model is a little bit of that softening permissioning statement. Anybody here heard of the Sandler sigh? Okay. I often get a question from me, tell me how your training's different. Well, it's an interesting question. Before I answer it or tell you what my clients tell me, would it be okay if I got a little clarity on what you're asking? Right? The Sandler sigh softens, slows things down, gets you to prepare a little bit, right? And then that permissioning statement, okay, if I ask you a couple of questions, help me understand, what do you mean by different? What's different in your world? Because I don't know. I don't know what history they've had with training, right? We've got a lot of really good answers. Go into ChatGTP and ask it why Sandler training is different. It's a great answer. Maybe they already did that. They don't need to hear that from me again. So get some understanding. What have they experienced? What's gone on? That's curiosity curve, right? It's a reverse. It's turning that question back on them and getting some clarity ahead of time. I ask them an open-ended question and then a closed-ended question to push the conversation forward. Sometimes they don't know what they're looking for, so we have to give them some options. Some people have asked me about how we're different, and what they're really looking for is, well, how is your methodology different than X? How's your training structure different than X? How's your reinforcement model different than? Are any of those the types of things you're looking for from a difference perspective, right? So you're giving them some menus, some options to choose from. Sometimes people don't like to talk about what's broken. That's why the why question can be hard. Third-party stories helps protect them. I've had other clients have this issue before. I've seen this in the past. This is what I've experienced. Other people who've said that to me, this is what they're really saying, right? Protect them a little bit. And then my favorite, the negative reverse. Salespeople are compensated to get yeses. Salespeople are driven to push prospects to say yes. If you want to stop being like your competition, get them to say no. Thinking about how do you frame your questions where the intended response is no. Do you have a budget for this? You're hoping they say, well, yes, of course we do. I'm guessing now that we talked through some of these challenges, probably not the right time to start talking about budget and investment, is it? You're hoping they say, no, I do think we need to have that conversation because frankly, we don't have one and we probably need to talk about how to create one, right? Same question, framed in a no, much deeper response, okay? So let's try to put a little structure behind this, right? If we're gonna go in groups of 3, good questioning is like a funnel. You gotta start wide, exploratory questions. Then maybe you gotta clarify, get some directions, menu questions, put things out there, give them options, and then confirming questions. So some of those things that we just talked about, curiosity, third-party story, negative reverses, helps progress along the way. Helps you figure out, where am I gonna take this conversation, right? Keeps you in that discovery mode. So when we start preparing our questions, it's easy to do the exploratory question, but we have to anticipate a little bit, well, what might they say? What if they just simply say, yeah, different, just tell me what you mean by different. Okay, well now I need to clarify, give them a little bit of something to go on to get some answers, and then I gotta find out, based on what they told me, is this a path that we should head down or not? And make it their choice, not yours. Should we talk about that further? You're hoping they say yes. I don't know, that sounds like a big topic. Probably don't wanna head down that path right now, do we? No, I do think we need to talk about it. We'll make some more time in this meeting. Now they've made the choice to go there, right? That's the power of the negative reverse, right? So let's think about this conversation a little bit differently. We get a different 800 number every time, great. Well, which is it? Is it the 800 number or the different person? Menu question, right? You're validating their question a little bit, giving them a menu. Oops. Okay, so I don't know what's going on in the animation here. Give this a second. Okay, so Salesforce, that sounds frustrating. I don't suppose, negative reverse, that's the only issue you have with them, right? So you're not getting into sales mode, you're still in discovery mode. We got to plan for that. Now, these are the money questions. It's one thing to diagnose the high-level issue. Where you make your money is in the middle of that pain funnel. What do you think that's costing you? What are the consequences of delaying or implementing? What happens if you stay with your current process? How would what I just showed you have an impact on your business? How would you measure that? How would you quantify that? What else could you be doing with your time if you weren't spending it on this, right? This is the difference between getting a deal that moves quickly and getting a deal that grows mold in your pipeline. This gets to impact. What's it costing them from a business sense? What's it costing them from a personal perspective is what creates that motivation. So framing those questions to find out the high-level issue, but then more importantly, being able to drill down and get the right answer is where you make your money. Now, Clint also talked a little bit about being assertive. There is a line between the aggressive, just give me the deal, and your ability to be assertive. Fair? Now, the fine line, I'm sure none of you are saying either of those things in the no pushback, somewhat assertive. When somebody says, I need a little bit of time to think this over, none of you or your salespeople are saying anything on those lower two, right? Nobody's doing that. But you might ask a pretty good question. Well, can you help me understand, well, what is it that you need to think over? It's a good question, right? It's a bit of a curiosity curve question. It's an open-ended question. It might get them talking. But the difference between being pretty assertive and solidly assertive is looking for trouble. Assuming that there might be a roadblock there that you have to discover, sounds like you've got some reservations about moving forward. Now, that's a negative reverse. The challenge with the negative reverse is you have to live with the consequences. They might tell you, well, yes, I have reservations because your product can't do A, B, C, X, Y, Z. We've got something else. Now you might be in a negotiation or you might be walking yourself out of a deal because you got the no. Got to be comfortable to take the no first. But the difference between assertive and aggressive is going for no versus going for yes and finding out where those challenges lie. It's a bit of an art form, right? You got to practice it. You got to get your tonality right. So let me leave you with a couple things. My clock says I have 47 seconds left. Maybe you'll afford me 2 minutes to get through this. A couple tips to get better at asking questions. Let's start with one. You got to have rapport. You have to earn the right to ask questions. Rapport comes from the upfront contract. Rapport also comes from understanding somebody's perspective. I often hear people say, oh, I saw you went to school at Georgetown. Wow, that's great. I love the Hoyas. Patrick Ewing, wow, he was awesome. There's no bonding and rapport there. Hey, Georgetown, that sounds awesome. I've never been there. What was your experience like there? What did you love about Georgetown? You're gaining perspective. You're getting their thought. How was your experience? What's your perception? Good questions to start to build that process, right? Always open up with curiosity. That's interesting. You guys talk to prospects all the time that probably look, smell, taste, feel exactly like the 45 other prospects you talk to. Fair? Well, everybody's different. Find out their interesting perspective. Even if you think you know what their problem is or what they need, let them tell you, right? Be curious. Third, slow down. 7 to 11 questions, right? Prepare them ahead of time. But not only the one question that you're hoping, what are my other reverses beyond that? How am I going to go a level deeper? How am I going to create third-party stories, menu questions? Prepare those with those clarifying reversals. And then gain permission. Don't assume you have the right to ask all of these questions. Don't assume you have the right. And ask your questions one at a time. When I listen to sales calls, one of the things I hear the most is salespeople are very uncomfortable with silence. They ask one question, and then they don't get an answer within a nanosecond. So they say, well, the reason I'm asking you this question is because, and they lead the witness. Or they throw 2 more questions on top of the question that they already asked, and now the prospect is confused and they don't know how to answer. So get comfortable with silence. Ask a question, let them process it, let them give you an answer. Be comfortable with silence. Mirrors and labels, very powerful. Mirrors are repeating words that they've already told you. Repeat their words back to them. Use them in your questions moving forward. And then label that with some emotion. That sounds frustrating. That sounds hard. Help me understand, is that what you're feeling? Right? Label them. And then protect them. You're asking people to potentially do something different. Change is about sales. You're asking people to make a change. Their existing process, the competitor that they're currently using, whatever it may be, they have to make change. They might not be comfortable telling you why it's important to do it. You've got to protect them a little bit, right? Go for no. Stop chasing yes. Chase the no. Find the problem. Find the other side of that. It's easy to say, well, it sounds like it's over. There's nuances between it's over and we still have an option to pursue, but we got to slow down. We got to do some other things. How do you create that soft no in there where they feel comfortable telling you what the roadblocks might be? Getting to that no is always about finding the roadblocks. And practice tonality. I want you to think about this for a second. When you are dealing with somebody who's in an emotional state and you are an aggressive, assertive, talking fast, pushing hard versus that nurturing parent tone, right? How can you slow that down? And then give and take. You know, prepare your questions, but also prepare your impactful answers, right? What is it that you can share? How can you use what you've shared to get more information from them? All right, all, I've overstayed my welcome with you by 3 minutes. I apologize for that. I hope you got some value out of this. Until we see you again, happy selling.